you remember the first time meeting Richard?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember meeting him. We were on an operation. He was commanding a platoon with Charlie Company, and I was commanding a platoon with Bravo Company. For some reason, we were told to operate together. So I met Richard. We were on an operation. His platoon with Charlie Company, mine with Bravo Company, in pursuit of a North Vietnamese Army unit. I can't remember how big the unit was at the time, but we had two of us in pursuit, two platoons in pursuit. And we caught up to them. We got in a firefight with them. We killed several of them down along the riverbank. And that night, we actually ended up setting up the night defensive perimeter with the two platoons, which normally we would just done one platoon in one place, one in another. But since we were there, we'd already just been in a battle together. It was dusk. Richard and I decided to go ahead and set up our perimeters together and spend the night that way. So that's what we did. And I met him at that time.
Was it a little shocking to see a guy 4'9"?
I'd heard about him. I mean, he was pretty well known actually for being the guy that's 4'9", and he's in the Army. We knew he'd gotten a waiver to be an officer. I had never met him before that, but then I met him, and I saw this little guy with all this equipment on him. It looked like a munchkin, but he was a tough little guy. He never seemed to waver from what he had to do, and he was just one of those guys. I don't know if he had short man syndrome or what, but he's one of those people that felt he had to be bigger than he was. So he had to be tougher than everybody else. And you could see that the way he carried himself. He was really a hard ass.
You mentioned to me on the phone once a confrontation with Richard where a story where he'd walk around with a pistol on his hip.
He used to carry this six-shooter. He had a six-shooter. If I remember, it was chromed, and it had white pistol grips on it. I don't know if he thought it was George Patton or what, but he would carry this thing around, and I was his commanding officer at that time. And he came walking up to me. I can't remember exactly where we were, but he walked up to me, and he's standing in front of me, and I was in a seated position. I had my rifle with me, and he comes walking up in front of me. We're about as far away as you and I are, and he drew the pistol, pointed it at me, and he flipped it back in the holster, kind of cowboy style. He's doing that draw and point stuff. And he did it again, and he put it back in the holster. And I'm just watching him like this, does this. And finally, he's getting ready to do it again. He's just looking at me with a smile on his face. And I said, Richard, that pistol clears that holster again, I'm going to stitch you from the bottom of your feet to the top of your fucking head. And I took the rifle and set it on automatic, and I had it pointed at his feet. And he just looked at me and smiled and turned around and walked away.
And you think that was like sort of a wild side of Richard, or that was just inside of him?
Part of his personality. That was the way he was. He was unconventional in that respect. I mean, he was not your average infantry officer. He was going to be that much tougher, that much more on the wild side, more unpredictable than the rest of the officers that I dealt with.
Do you know if he had any problems with any of the other guys, the other commanding? There was ever a situation that got pretty serious?
I can't think of anything in particular. He had a reputation for being a real tough leader. There was no time that you would see him quit. He'd be in some very bad situations. I mean, there were times that Richard got in some real tough combat situations, and he was always very aggressive, which you need to be. You don't want to be a victim. You want to be the person that makes the other guy a victim. So you have to do that by being aggressive. You can't just lay back and take it. And he was one of the guys that led very strongly in that respect. He may not always agree with the way he did it, but it seemed to work for him. And people that served under him in general liked him. From what I could tell, the ones that I've known.
You told me about a specific firefight that you overheard on the radio. I think it was Richard's platoon was involved in, but it sounded pretty bad.
Yeah, I was listening on the battalion radio net, and what had happened, Richard was running a recon platoon, and he got himself in a situation where they set up a night position, and they got surrounded by probably about a North Vietnamese company, so they were outnumbered maybe 4 or 5 to 1. And the North Vietnamese were probing this position and trying to attack through it. This went on all night long. You could hear, when they were transmitting on the radio, you could hear all the firing going on. And we were close enough to where we could actually hear it anyway. But you could hear it over the radio net too. And there wasn't any way to get any real help to him at the time, so nobody could get any helicopters in. It was dark. They didn't have any maneuverable units that could go in there. They were firing mortar support for him and things like that, but that was about all that they could do. Excuse me. And he managed to make it through the night. And they came out of that the next day. They had a lot of casualties, but they fought all the way through the night. They killed a lot of North Vietnamese doing it, and they never gave up. I mean, it was not an option to give up, because if you gave up in that situation, everybody was dead.